Hello, and welcome to the Wooden Ball Show. I'm your host, Dave Ball, also known as Blinston on Reddit and at Blinston1 on Twitter. Like always, I am joined by my partner in crime here, Blake, who is known as at ChatMarkKirk on Twitter and BTownBomb on Reddit. And today we are joined by Ryan, who you can follow on Reddit at Better Call Saul and on Twitter at Ryan Ohan. We're also joined by Cozy, who is Cozy47 on Reddit, and on Twitter he's the real Cozy. So how you all doing?
Good, how are you?
Doing good.
Doing all right.
So today on the show, we're going to be first going into what happened last night because there's only one game, I believe, which was the Islanders versus the Hurricanes, in which the Islanders won. What was the score? Forgot to write that down.
It was a 5-3 victory by the New York Islanders, and I suppose I'll take over from here for a bit and talk about last night's game. 8 total goals scored in that game, 5 for the Islanders and 3 for Carolina, and 2 of those, both Islanders goals, came in the first period. 17:06 in the first. It was a power play goal by Johnny Boychuk, already making his name known within the Islanders organization. He was assisted by Okposo and Tavares. And then Brock Nelson, a little over a minute later, he was assisted by Tavares and Boychuk. Boychuk's on the stat sheet here, plenty. Nelson gets his second goal, a power play goal, 7:38 in the second, the only goal of that period. He was assisted by Boychuk and Tavares. And this third period saw 5 total goals here. Carolina gets on the board a power play goal by Nathan Gerbe, assisted by Justin Falk and Andrej Sekera. That was a minute 25 into the third. And then 5:11 into the third, Mikhail Grabovski with his first of the year for the Islanders, assisted by Ryan Strome and Nelson. Travis Hamonic, 12:19 in the third, assisted by Nelson and Strome. And Carolina gets the next 2 goals there, but it's not enough, of course. 14:20 in the third, Chris Terry, assisted by Sekera and Nash. And a power play goal by Eric Stahl, 18:26, assisted by Lindholm and Tlusty. Johnny Boychuk was the second star of that game. He had 1 goal, 2 assists for 3 points. In his first game with the Islanders, he gets 3 points there and helps his team to get their first win of the season.
All right. And today we have a huge kind of lineup to schedule. All 30 teams are in attendance in a game today. And I think this is the 6th time in history this has ever happened. If I remember that correctly from MR Hockey.
Yes, once we get the record book pulled out on that.
So
now
there's
we'll
gonna be Go ahead.
just go over all these games here.
Okay, so it's going to be Washington versus Boston and Boston, Pittsburgh versus Toronto and Toronto, Anaheim versus Detroit, Ottawa versus Tampa Bay, New Jersey versus Florida, Carolina versus the Islanders again, it's a rematch, Montreal versus Flyers, New York Rangers versus Columbus, Calgary versus St. Louis, Dallas versus Nashville, Buffalo versus Chicago, Minnesota versus Colorado, Los Angeles versus Arizona, Edmonton versus Vancouver, and Winnipeg versus San Jose.
Dave, want to make your picks for today's games here?
I'll just run down the list of each one. It's Boston's going to win, Pittsburgh's going to win. Probably the Ducks, Tampa, New Jersey, Islanders, Flyers, Rangers, Blues, Dallas, Chicago, Minnesota, Kings, Vancouver, and then San Jose. Kind of what I'm feeling.
I'm feeling an upset pick. I guess you can call it an upset pick. I'm feeling Detroit over Anaheim in that one.
What about you two guys? What are you thinking?
Um, I'll go from west to east. I'm gonna say San Jose, Vancouver, Colorado will get the revenge. Chicago over Buffalo, LA over Arizona, Anaheim over Detroit, Dallas over Nashville, New Jersey over Florida, Carolina over the Islanders, um, Ottawa over Tampa Bay, Boston over Washington, Pittsburgh over Toronto, Montreal wins over Philadelphia, and as much as I hate to say it, New York will beat the Blue Jackets, and I think the upset will be Calgary over St. Louis.
Going east to west, I think it'll be Boston over Washington, Toronto over Pittsburgh, Anaheim over Detroit, Tampa over Ottawa, New Jersey will win in a shootout over Florida, Islanders over Hurricanes. I think the Flyers will finally pull out a win. Rangers over Blue Jackets, Blues over Flames, but Johnny Hockey's going to score. Stars over Predators, Hawks over Sabres, Avalanche come back and win against Minnesota, Kings over Coyotes, Canucks over Oilers, and Sharks over Jets.
I feel like we have the same exact kind of thought process for all of our things.
Pretty much.
Just about, almost. And to go over the times of the game starts here. Now, this is all Central Time, of course, since I'm reading it off of my mobile device, and I live in the Central Time Zone. St. Louis and Calgary, Boston and Washington, Pittsburgh and Toronto, Anaheim and Detroit, Ottawa and Tampa, New Jersey and Florida, Carolina and the Islanders, Montreal and Philadelphia, and the Rangers and Columbus. They will all start at 6 p.m. Central Time. Dallas and Nashville will have a 7 p.m. puck drop. Chicago and Buffalo will start just a half hour after that one, 7:30. And half hour after that, Colorado and Minnesota, Arizona and Los Angeles, they'll start at 8 p.m. Central Time. Vancouver and Edmonton and San Jose and Winnipeg, they will start at 9 p.m. They'll be the later games for you on this very huge day for NHL hockey today.
All right, so I guess we'll head into the interviews finally now. Today we're going to have two interviews with the Rangers here. Ryan's going to be the one being interviewed, and for the Devils, the people who got the last pick in the NHL draft this year, will be Blake interviewing Cozy there. So without further ado, I guess we get started on the Rangers. So, how you doing, Ryan? You ready for this?
I'm so ready.
Okay, so kind of tell us about how your season went and how the postseason went for your team.
Well, everyone knows how the season ended. Unfortunately, we reached the Stanley Cup final, but couldn't really bring it home. Lost in 5 games to the Kings. But overall, I can't complain too much about the season. I think nobody really expected us to get to the finals, but just making the playoffs, looking at it in October, just making the playoffs was going to be a struggle. But we overcame it. Cam Talbot came in and stepped up big time when Hank kind of had some issues there at the beginning. In his first, he went 8-3 in the latter half of 2013 when Hank was doing bad. So he really stepped up well. And of course we lost Marty Biron after Hurdle kicked him out of the league. But overall it was I call it a good season.
Okay. And during this season, you traded a pretty big player and your captain Ryan Callahan for Martin St. Louis. Kind of give us your thoughts on that trade and if you kind of liked it, I guess.
Yeah, I was kind of torn. Callie was one of my favorite players. I think he was liked by a lot of fans. Obviously, he was a great player, a great leader for the team. But we were all kind of surprised at how he was kind of putting money in front of the team a little bit. And I know players, they try to go after as much money as they can. But had he stayed with New York, he he could have retired here. He would have had his number retired. He would have been highly revered. But instead, he wanted a bigger contract, and so we didn't want to give that to him. And I agree with that. Like I said, he's a great player, great leader, but I don't think he deserved as much as he got. So I'm happy with the St. Louis trade, and obviously it helped out in the postseason, and he really stepped up then and became a leader then. So I overall I liked it.
Okay. So now kind of getting in depth for your forward core. Kind of tell us about how your forward core did this season, and then give them a grade at the end.
Well, for the forwards, our top line was our third line. That for most of the season it comprised of Matt Zuccarello, Derek Brassard, and Benoit Pouliot. If you ever watched a game on NBC Sports, you would hear Pierre talking about how they were the most consistent, and for once he was right. No, he's always right. But they had great chemistry together. We would hear stories about how they would go to Knicks games together. They would do things off ice together. So they worked well together. With regards to Rick Nash, he struggled a little bit in the beginning. He picked it up in the end, but he admitted during the offseason that his concussions kind of affected his play a little bit. But he stepped it up in the end. Chris Kreider continued to grow. I think he's going to have a breakout year this year, and he after a great postseason 2 years ago, he had a good season. And another standout was Dominic Moore. Had a great stepped in to that fourth line center role really well. We weren't really expecting much from him, but after the Katie Moore story came out, a lot of players rallied around him as well, and he played really well. And then finally, the star was Mr. Matt Zuccarello, our leading point getter. I think he was really that took everyone by surprise, but it was a nice surprise to see him kind of step up and play really well.
Okay. So kind of give them the forward core as a whole a grade.
Overall, I give them an A-.
Okay. A very good grade for a core that led you to the finals, so I guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So now do kind of the same thing with the defensemen that you had this year.
Defense was it wasn't terrible. It wasn't superb. It was better than average. McDonough was the huge standout. He set personal records in points, and he had more goals this season, I think, than he had ever had in his entire season before. He had 43 points this year. And the turning point for the defense really came when Del Zotto was traded to Nashville, and we picked up Kevin Kline. And a lot of people for a long time had been clamoring to get rid of Del Zotto. And when we finally did it, Kline came in and he played really well in a way that you don't notice him when he's on the ice, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
He was just quietly good, and he did his job. So I think we were very happy with the way he played.
No news is good news for defensemen, I think.
That's very true.
Yeah. Basically. If you don't hear about them, that means they're doing their job.
Yeah. So overall, for a grade, I would give them a B+. They're higher than average, but not anything crazy. It wasn't PK Subban levels or anything, but.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess to kind of do the same thing with your goaltenders now.
Well, goaltenders, like I said, Hank kind of struggled in the beginning of the year. The whole team as a whole kind of struggled, but that kind of paved the way for Cam Talbot to step up, and that was really big. He came in a big way after Marty left, and once Hank got back to form, he's going to do what he's going to do. He had a great season, had a great end of the season, and really kind of carried us through the postseason. He came up with a lot of big stops, a lot of big saves. So without him, I don't see us making the finals one bit.
No, definitely. He definitely kept you in a lot of your series that you had.
Yeah, and for grades, I give them an A+.
Yeah. Kind of can't fault one of the best goaltenders in the world. He did the best he could.
Right, and we're lucky to have the tandem that we have in those two goalies.
All right, so kind of go over coaching. You got a new coach this year, Alain Vigneault. He took over for John Tortorella during the off season. So kind of tell us what you thought about him, kind of things he did during the season that kind of stuck in your mind, and then give him a grade at the end too.
Yeah, I thought he coming into the last season, we all weren't sure how the team was going to respond to the change in respect to systems. AV's system is a lot different from Tortorella's system. Torts would play a very defensive. Everyone's got to block a shot. Kind of come back on defense and no pinching or anything like that. And AV played a much more high tempo, offensive, a lot of cycling in the corners, a lot of D pinching. So we weren't really sure how we were going to respond to it. And at first we didn't. It took some time to get used to his system. But I think he showed a lot of resolve in sticking with it and not going back to the old system that the players knew. He made sure that the players were going to get to know his system. So I think he did really well, and it's no easy feat to take a team to the Stanley Cup Finals in your first year with them.
Oh, definitely not.
So I'd say he had a successful year. My one gripe that I had with the coaching was with the associate Scotty Arneal. He kind of dropped the ball on our power play in the playoffs. We were 12%.
Wow.
I think that was pretty one of the lowest for a team to make the Cup Finals, to have a 12% power play percentage.
I think sorry, go ahead.
I would have liked to see him make some more adjustments, but
Yeah. I think the only the team that in recent memory that was lower than that was probably Boston when they won the cup.
Yeah, back in they were pretty low.
I think they didn't even have like 5% success rate.
Yeah, I remember people talking
They were
about
obnoxious. It was obnoxiously low from what I remember. But usually for the playoffs, your playoff experience lives and die by the special teams.
Yeah, which was surprising that we were able to do so well, make it so far with such an abysmal power play.
Yeah. All right, so that kind of goes with the past season. That goes along with the past season. So now heading into the off season, talk about who you drafted in the NHL draft this year in Philadelphia.
It was kind of an uneventful draft for us, to be honest. We lost our first round pick when we made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. We lost that to Tampa in the St. Louis trade. So and they ended up picking up Joshua Ho-Sang, who has been made waves during the offseason with a couple videos. But yeah, so we didn't have a first round pick. We picked up a couple goaltenders, which I think is good. We don't really have much going on in Hartford with regards to that, so I'm glad we got that. But this name I'm excited for was our last pick in the 5th round. His name is Tyler Nan, and he's committed to OSU, but he's a very offensively minded defenseman. Reminds me a lot of Brian Rafalski, and he's from Minnesota, and he actually won this past year the Minnesota Mr. Hockey Award, and that was previously won by Ryan McDonough has won it, Paul Martin has won it, Nick Leddy has won it. So there have been a lot of big names that have won that. So I'm excited to see what he can do at Ohio State this year, and if we can get a hold of him, bring him up.
Okay, so you guys kind of lost a lot of your team during this offseason. One of the first things you did was trade Derek Dorsett for a 2014 third-round pick. How does losing him affect your team? Because I know he was part of your fourth line, I believe.
Yeah,
he was really good for you guys in the playoffs.
Yeah, it was him, Dominic Moore, and Brian Boyle that played exceptional for a fourth line. We were lucky to have them to be able to run 4 lines. It hurts a little bit. He was a big body. He played well. He stuck up for his teammates. But and it hurts especially considering who we got for him, which I'll get into later. But I wouldn't say it's a huge loss. I would have rather kept Danny Carcillo over Dorsett, to be honest, which I know a lot of people that I know would disagree with me on that. But that's what I think, and I like him better. But Dorsett is a great player, and he's going to do well over in Vancouver, and I'll be rooting for him.
Okay. One of the things you lost quite a few players, as I said before. You lost Benoit Pouliot, Anton Strawman, Brad Richards to a buyout, Brian Boyle, Dan Carcillo, and Stu Bickle. How does losing this pretty big core of players affect your team as a whole?
Well, it's tough. There's a lot of players in there that had specific roles on this team that, in the coming months, it's going to be tough to see who can fill them.
Mm-hmm.
The one of the most I was most upset about, and a lot of people didn't really think about it too much, was losing Anton Strawman. I think he was an exceptional D-man. He was really underrated. He didn't score a lot of goals, but his Corsi stats were very good. And he partnered with Mark Stahl the most last year, and he made Mark Stahl look really good. And without Strawman, Mark Stahl didn't play very well. So, I was most upset losing Strawman. I would have liked to keep him, even gotten rid of Stahl, to be honest, over Strawman. The second one that I was most upset about was Pouliot. That was a big part of our third line, as I mentioned before. It was Pouliot, Zuccarello, and Brassard.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's going to be a tough hole to fill in that. So we'll see, who can step up and kind of play with Zuccarello and Brassard, or if we play around with the lines a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Brad Richards, we kind of all knew that was coming. I'm not going to go into that too much. We all knew a buyout was coming. He played well to end the season,
But not well enough for his contract.
Yeah, his cap hit was just way too high to justify keeping him. Brian Boyle, big fourth line guy, tough loss for he was a good penalty killer. That's what I think he's going to be missed most for. Danny Carcillo, like I said, when we got him, a lot of people didn't like it, and I didn't, to be honest, at first. But I think he played pretty well for us. He didn't take too many stupid penalties outside of the Eastern Conference Finals.
Which is a big surprise for him.
Right, yeah, and he's kind of known as a goon. But he didn't take any dumb penalties, and I think he scored some opportune goals. He had one against the Islanders in the game at Yankee Stadium, and I think he had one in the postseason. I can't remember.
Yeah, he may have against us. Not quite sure.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Because
okay.
remember, then he skated into the boards and then was laughing at the Flyers fans were giving him the finger on the boards.
I know, I'm kidding.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that situation happened.
Oh, that was great.
But he actually has a really underrated hands, in my opinion. He can actually score some pretty big goals for your team in the playoffs.
He can, and I think he handles the puck well. I think he handles the puck better than Dorsett, and definitely better than Mr. Tanner Glass. But, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And Stu Bickle, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. He played last year in Hartford, and they scratched him a bunch of times. He played 24 games with them and scored a whopping 1 goal. So, to be honest, I'm not going to miss old Stu too much. He can go have fun in Minnesota.
Okay. You guys lost a lot of... Oh, sorry, that was signed. We're doing signed now. You guys signed quite a few different players. John Moore, Derek Brassard, Chris Kreider, Matt Zuccarello. No, that's re-signed. I'm in the wrong list now. Sorry. You signed Dan Boyle, Chris Mueller, Tanner Glass, Lee Stepniak, and Ryan Malone. Do you think these additions are going to be good?
I am hoping these additions are going to be good. I can't say for certainty that they will. A lot of people are high on Dan Boyle. I think Glenn Sather has a thing for signing the 2004 Tampa Bay Lightning. I don't know what it is. But, he's a good player. He can play on the power play. He can quarterback the power play. But he's getting up there in age. His points per game has been decreasing the last number of years. So, it's going to be tough to tell. And, like I said, he's getting up there in age, so it wouldn't surprise me if, he broke his hand or something. Like, he's old and frail. So, we'll have to see if he gets hurt or anything.
Yeah. Do you have any feelings on any of the other people that you signed during this? Like
Well,
Chris Mueller, Tanner Glass, Lee Stepniak.
The one that I dislike the most, as I alluded to, is Tanner Glass.
Mhm.
I think it's a major downgrade from what we had there on the fourth line. He's not good for much. He's good for punching people in the face, which I think isn't really needed on this team. He played under AV a couple years back in Vancouver, and in those 2 years he scored 7 goals and racked up 194 penalties.
Wow.
So I think that's kind of we went in the opposite direction. You know, we had a good fourth line, and I know we couldn't keep them all, but I don't like what we got to replace what we lost. Lee Stempniak, you know, he's a solid bottom six player. He has the ability to put up 30 plus points. You know, he's nothing special, but just a solid grinder. Ryan Malone, I'm kind of torn on. You know, it's a low risk signing. He's another bottom six player with experience, especially on the power play. But I don't see him fitting into AV's system very well. You know, he's a big, lumbering forward, and that doesn't really do very well with Neo. You know, and you know, maybe 6 months from now, I'll be eating crow, and Malone will be leading the power play, but that'll remain to be seen.
All right. So now to the re-signed list that I was listing a little bit ago. You re-signed John Moore, Derek Brassard, Chris Kreider, Matt Zuccarello, and Dominic Moore. Do you like the re-signings of all these players?
I do. I think John Moore had a decent season last year, and you know, one of the reasons I liked bringing in Boyle is because he can kind of serve as a mentor for these young D-men, especially John Moore. You know, Moore played well on the power play last year, so that could only get better with Danny Boyle hopefully on the roster. Brassard, like I said, he was on that great third line, so I'm excited to bring him back. And it's going to be especially important with Stepan out for so long. He's going to have to step into that center role a little more than he's used to. Chris Kreider, I couldn't be more excited about. I think he's going to have a breakout year this year. He had a nearly perfect game in our game against St. Louis. He had a goal and a nice assist on a Rick Nash goal. And I think he's going to he could put up 50 or 60 points. Zuccarello, I couldn't be more excited about. I think he needs to retire a Ranger. I think we need to retire his number. I think we need to retire the name Mats from ever being on the team again. He led the team last year in points. He was tied for first in assists, and he was third for goals, which for him was crazy. So, yeah, I'm excited for our little hobbit. And Dominic Moore, that was a big re-signing. You know, hindsight's 20/20, but given the center situation again, he's going to have to step up, and he did step up in our game against St. Louis. I think he was the only center that was winning faceoffs. So he's going to have to step up big time, and he can score goals too. He scored the series clinching goal against Montreal. So I'm excited to have him back.
Okay. So even though the preseason is over and the regular season has started, do you see anything happening within like the first month now of like someone getting signed for your team?
Well, rumors have been circulating today that we are shopping for a D-man, given our Boyle situation. Which, I mean, it's not surprising that we're shopping, but you know, I don't know who we would get. We brought up Matt Hunwick, to replace. We moved Klein up to the second pairing, and Hunwick's going to play on the third. But you know, we'll see if we can get anything from another team. I don't think we need to. I think we can just wait it out. Hunwick played well in preseason. Played well last year with Lake Erie and in the AHL. So I think he can hold his own and wait until Boyle gets back.
Okay. So that kind of concludes our off-season talks. But before we do that, kind of give a grade about how you think your off-season went this season.
Well, with the outlier of Tanner Glass, which gets a negative number, I'm going to give us a B+.
Okay. What kind of goes into that grade?
I'm not thrilled with who we let go. You know, given Strawman and Pouliot. But we picked up some guys that can replace them, so I'm cautiously optimistic to see how they step into those roles.
Okay. Now, heading into the next season, how do you feel about this season coming up?
I feel all right. At least I did before the game against St. Louis, when we had a full defenseman core. But it's tough. Any year a team advances to the Stanley Cup final, the expectation among the fans is that they need to do it again, or else it's a failure of a season, which isn't necessarily the case. I think if we make the playoffs and make it a couple rounds, that obviously I want to win the cup, but it's not a failure if we don't. I think a lot of people are high on us because of the run we went on last year. So I hope we can kind of live up to the hype.
Okay. And what do you think your lineup's gonna kind of boil down to?
It's going to boil down to if our centers can step up and if Marty can perform in the center position. St. Louis is stepping in Stepan's absence in the number one center role. And in the first game, he looked all right. His positioning was off a couple times, because he's used to playing that wing position. And center and wing it's a very different play. But he won some face-offs when he needed to. He was in position most of the time. Didn't make too many mistakes. So I think if our centers can be solid. And our defense can kind of step up for this month or so. I'm not worried about our goaltending, knock on wood, right now. So I'm okay with the lineup as it is.
Okay. So you think you're going to be buyers or sellers at the trade deadline coming up, and what do you think you'll be shopping for if you are buyers?
Well, I'm hoping that we're neither, which means that we are in a great position. I can't think of anything that we would need to pick up. Like I said, with when we get Boyle back, our defense core will be whole again, and when we get Stepan back, we'll have our centers and wings back to where they should be. So I'm not too concerned with picking up. I would love to shoot Tanner Glass into the sun, if that's an option.
I don't think we can do that. I don't think that's allowed.
No, the Sun won't accept that trade.
No.
He's a big cap hit, to be honest. But other than that, I'm okay with the lineup.
Okay. So you think you're going to make the playoffs this year?
I do.
Okay. And now kind of our last three questions. Who do you think is going to score the most goals on your team?
Chris Kreider.
Okay. And most points overall?
Marty St. Louis.
Okay. And just say, now my favorite question to ask, I love this question. Say everything just goes to shit and your team is just bad. Who is going to be thrown under the bus, in your opinion?
Well, I think the fans will throw Glenn Sather, the GM, under the bus. He's made too many high-risk decisions this offseason to avoid the blame. But given our owner's recent history with Sather, if the team does tank, he'll get a promotion and probably made GM for life. But I think if we do tank, Dolan will put the blame on AV, unfortunately. He kind of did that with Torts, kind of ran him out of town a little bit. I don't think Torts deserved all the hate he got. But, that's kind of how it goes in New York with a big market.
It's the politics of the job.
Yeah, it kind of all falls on the coach, good and bad.
Okay. So I don't have anything left for you. I don't know if Blake has a question or not.
Now, one thing I would like to go over with Ryan, and one thing I'll also go over with Cozy, since due to the timing of these two interviews, I feel like, Ryan, we should go over how the Rangers' season opener went, a 3-2 victory against the St. Louis Blues, kind of break down that game, in terms of what you liked out of the Rangers, what you didn't like out of the Rangers, what St. Louis did that impressed you, and how the Rangers responded to all that.
Well, the one thing that kind of immediately stood out to me, kind of right from the beginning, was our speed and how fast we were playing. I don't know if it was just because it was the first game, or if Carl Hagelin has been giving people some secret sauce or what, but we were flying out of the gate, especially in that first period. We really controlled the play really well. I'm pretty sure we led in shots by a wide margin at that point. And I was really happy with the first period, especially with Nash getting that first goal, because I know the longer he goes without scoring, the more he's going to have a bigger monkey on his back. The second period, last year, the second period was always our kryptonite, and I think St. Louis really came out and really pushed the tempo, and they really controlled that period. No one scored, but I was impressed with how they played. And the third period, it was kind of back and forth. If you look at the scoreboard, Schwartz kind of got that fluky goal that kind of went up in the air and fell behind Hank to tie it at 1, and then Kreider comes back on the breakaway with a nice extension pass from Nash to beat Elliott, and then Paul Stastny kind of dances around our D-men and puts one past Hank. I think he might have been screened, but he scored a nice goal, especially given what had happened to his leg earlier in the game. And then Nash in the end, that weird bounce off the stanchion comes back into the zone with everyone breaking out, and Marty kind of finds it and gives a nice little pass over to Nash for the game winner. But I was impressed by St. Louis. I have the utmost respect for them as an organization. I think they're a great team, and I think their fans can expect good things from them.
Alrighty, and the final thing, before we will officially end the Rangers overview, what can we expect out of the next game tonight against the Columbus Blue Jackets?
Well, you can bet there's going to be a whole lot of narrative about Nash and his history in Columbus, especially given last year's game, where it was in Columbus and he was kind of getting pestered all game by Bobrovsky, and they kind of got into a little shoving match, and then Nash ended up getting into a fight, and I think that game last year was his best game that he played. He came out on fire, and he played well all game, so I expect the same. He tried to downplay it in the post-game interview from 2 nights ago, the whole Columbus-Nash past. But, I think he's excited to come back, and he likes playing in that building, so it's going to be a high-tempo game.
Alrighty. And one thing I must mention from the St. Louis game, you alluded to what happened to Paul Stastny's leg. That was in the second period. He received a hit from Dan Girardi of the Rangers, and he went to the locker rooms after that. From what it looked like, it looked like it could have been maybe Girardi got his knee or something. But in the post-game interviews, Stastny was asked about that, and he was quoted as saying he kind of hit him more in the quad area. So he didn't really feel it was a knee hit, which is a good thing to report there.
Yeah, and I think if you look at Girardi as a player, he doesn't have any history with dirty play or anything. I think he was trying to make a body play on Stastny, and Stastny moved to his right, and Girardi went to get him, and their legs kind of just happened to collide. At first, I thought it was a knee-on-knee hit, but I'm glad to hear that it was just in his quad.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, well, now we've officially concluded the team overview of the New York Rangers. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us this afternoon to discuss your team.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. And now we will pass the interviewee torch over to Cozy here. We will now discuss the final of our 30 team overviews. We will now dive into the New Jersey Devils. Are you ready for this interview, Cozy?
Sure am.
Alrighty. Now, first thing we have to go over is kind of a clarification, because for those of you that have been following us this offseason, we've been going in terms of the draft order. And as you know, the draft order usually goes kind of in terms of the regular season finish. We started out with Buffalo and worked our way up from there. But some of these listeners may be wondering, well, how is it that we're ending with the New Jersey Devils, a team that didn't make the postseason last year? Well, Cozy, if you could just kind of go over the whole process that gave the New Jersey Devils the draft position that they were given.
Sure. That all came about, as a lot of hockey fans will remember, when the Devils signed Ilya Kovalchuk to that absolutely ridiculous, 2,000-year contract, paid him $5 bazillion or whatever it was. And so, they were, I think the wording the league used was they attempted to circumvent the cap with his contract, making it very front-loaded and tapering off a lot at the very end of it. So as a punishment, we had to give up our first overall draft pick in the following 4 or 5 seasons, and a bunch of other little caveats that the NHL added. When Kovalchuk retired, however, the league lifted a few of those sanctions on the Devils, starting with how much cap retention the team will be having over his contract. So we're paying, I think it's $250,000 a year towards Kovalchuk's contract for the duration of it until 2025. And we also were given the 30th pick for last year's draft in Philadelphia. And we weren't allowed to trade it either.
Alrighty. And that's the clarification for you listeners that may have been a little off-put by that. So now we can begin discussing the team, beginning with the previous season. Just kind of give us a insight, just kind of introduce us into the Devils' previous season.
All right. Well, last year was pretty interesting. There were a lot of storylines going into the season. The biggest was probably in net, where we had Martin Brodeur, our longtime goaltender, as well as recently brought in Corey Schneider from the Vancouver Canucks. Back in the draft when it was held in New Jersey, we traded our first-round draft pick to Vancouver for him. So a lot of people are wondering, well, what's going to happen? Is Schneider going to be the backup? Is he maybe going to steal Marty's starting spot? How is that all going to play out? As well, we signed Jaromir Jagr to a 1-year deal just to fill that first-line role that Kovalchuk left. So overall, last season, Jagr ended up being our top scorer in a pretty disappointing season. We were absolutely horrible in the shootout. I don't even want to think about that anymore. We didn't win a single one throughout the entire year, which was obviously an NHL record, and one that I don't think anybody hopes to repeat. As well, we had a few players step up and a few show that their value to the team just isn't isn't there either. Players like Andrei Loktionov, Volchenkov as well. They're good NHL players, but just didn't manage to step up into a role for the team at all. So over the offseason, we let both of those players go.
Okay, and now we'll discuss the unit breakdown. We'll go over the Devils' offense, defense, goaltending, and coaching in that order. We'll kind of discuss their performances from the previous season, and then at the end of your thoughts, just kind of give them a grade on their performance from the previous season. And we'll begin by talking about the Devils' forward core. Of course, one of the biggest additions from the previous offseason was adding the great Jaromir Jagr into the ranks. But, it wasn't all about Jagr there in the previous season. Patrick Elias, from what I gather, had a fairly good season. Travis Zajac, who has one of my favorite names in the NHL, I must add. He had a fairly decent year from what I gather. But kind of talk about the Devils' forward core from the previous season.
All right. Well, as you mentioned, Jagr, he had just a tremendous year. He was our leading scorer with 67 points. He added 24 goals for us, which, apart from Adam Henrique, that was the second highest goal total on the team. Elias, fans around the NHL might not recognize him or know him as a points getter, but he's been one of the more consistent scorers for forwards, at least, throughout the league over his career. I mean, 53 points was a good output from him, but he's also capable of getting all the way up to 70 points in a season. Zajac as well stepped up. He put up a lot of points. Same with Adam Henrique, our second line center. There's a bit of an interesting storyline that's going to be developing between those two as to who is going to be our legitimate number one, because they both have proven that they can play top line minutes and play with top line players. So who the team wants to commit to, it looks like Zajac, but Henrique is more than capable of being a team's one center. Eric Jelena I guess we're talking about forwards here, so I'll leave him off. But Ryan Clough, we added him last offseason to replace David Clarkson. And he had an interesting start to the year. He got injured with a concussion and was out for the first half of the season, I believe it was. But when he came back, he put up 26 points in the last 40 games. So when he's in the roster, I mean, he's very capable. He adds a lot to the team. Adds a lot not just for grit and to push people around, but also obviously in points. So for the forwards, I mean, if I have to give them a score from last season, it really depends on the line, just because our bottom six forwards did not do anything for us at all. I mean, they filled their role, but we expected a lot more from them, and a lot of players had a really, really slow start to the year. So for forwards, I'm going to give them a C+, based on their performance. I mean, the people that we expected to play well, played well, and the players that we needed to support us, they were up and down.
Alrighty, and now we'll move behind the blue line now, and kind of just go over the Devils' defensive unit.
All right. Well, last year on defense, we had 9 players that we rotated through the lineup. It's 9 players for 6 positions, and 7 players that can be dressed in any game. So there were a few players that didn't get a lot of ice time. Adam Larson, one of the big ones, and as well, we tried to see where John Merrill, Mark Fain, and Eric Jelena, I'll fit into our lineup, putting them into kind of second defensive pairing minutes as well as bottom pairing minutes, and giving them all looks on the power play. The most successful of those, I would have to say, is Jelena, who put up 22 power play points last year. So while I think he's just entering his second or third year in the NHL here, so that's quite impressive. Andy Green, again, another solid player that can play any type of role for us. Larson, like I said, he didn't get a lot of consistent minutes and a lot of consistent play, so that may have hurt his development a bit. But I think a lot of fans and even the team is starting to fall out of love with Adam Larson a bit. A few years ago, some people might remember he was our 4th overall draft selection, and he was expected to pretty much become a player along the same lines as Victor Hedman of the Tampa Bay Lightning. But it hasn't happened yet for one reason or another. Bryce Salvador, the Devils' punching bag, essentially. A lot of the fans don't like him. They don't like him having the C on his sweater and don't like his contract at all. But the problem with him is, he's 35. He's never been a top player, a top defenseman on any team. So he's more just filling a role until his contract is up, in my mind. His contract's $3 million. He's got this season left, and then I see the Devils not re-signing him at all. So for our score last year on defense, we were pretty porous, but we also had a lot of rookies and a lot of players that were being swapped in and out of the lineup. So for them, I'd have to give them a B-. All things considered, we had a great defensive core that were blocking a lot of shots and limiting chances. So that was one area that we did well last season.
Okay, and now we'll move in between the pipes and talk about the Devils goaltending unit. Of course, one of the biggest mainstays, not just for the New Jersey Devils, but one of the more recognizable mainstay faces in the entire league, Martin Brodeur. He's had a rather interesting year, very kind of intricate situation there with a whole bunch of things occurring there, I suppose. And Corey Schneider picked up from Vancouver in the draft. Just kind of talk about, just kind of go over the intricacies of the Brodeur situation, since it's very fluid, I guess would be the word. A lot of different working deals occurring there, and kind of talk about Brodeur's and Schneider's performances from the previous season.
Sure. Well, like you said, their situation was very fluid. I mean, it was always a toss-up as to who was going to get the start. Do you go with Corey Schneider and give him the minutes and see what he can do with his time, or do you give it to the name you know and love in Martin Brodeur? And for most of the season, we gave it to Brodeur, just to see what he had left and if he could battle for his spot still. And looking at their numbers, I mean, it's pretty obvious what happened. Brodeur, he's 41, he's in his 20th season. His numbers dipped and really showed his age, which was unfortunate. You never want to see a goalie kind of that you've relied on for so long have a season like that, but it is what it is. And Schneider really stepped up. I mean, he had tremendous numbers, the goals against of under 2. And while his record was more or less 500, we relied on him pretty heavily, and he came through. So this offseason, the Devils rewarded him for his efforts by giving him a contract extension. So, I guess to wrap up for them, it was a pretty up and down seesaw battle between the two. It provided a lot of drama and a lot of stories for our bloggers and media to cover. Overall, I'd give the goaltending a score of B, just because Schneider did perform very well when we really had no expectations for him, and he stepped up big for us.
Okay, and now to wrap up the season in review as well as the unit breakdowns, we'll move behind the bench and talk about head coach Peter DeBoer and the Devils coaching staff.
Well, behind the bench we had Peter DeBoer, who is in his second or third season with us. Escapes my mind right now. But the team knew more or less what to expect, and the fans as well knew what to expect out of him. He's a guy that likes to give the younger players a lot of time, give them a lot of looks, and time to gain that NHL experience that is valid to them. The team overall, I mean, we had a pretty disappointing season as far as if you look at our record. 35 wins, 29 losses, 18 overtime losses. That's as far as the Devils of the past 10 years or 15 years. That's a bit of a disappointing record to see, but it is what it is. We had 200 goals against, which normally that's pretty impressive, and that should be good enough, but the goals just weren't there for us. The coaching staff, though, they're all experienced. They've all been involved with the Devils system. I mean, we had Scott Stevens for the defensive coach, who I think really helped them develop a bit and learn more about the Devils system of play, as well as learn about playing their position a lot more than anyone else really could have taught them. So the coaching staff overall, I give them a score of C. It's they did a good job. They did good enough, I suppose, not to be let go or anything. But we'll see what they can do this year.
Alrighty, and that concludes the season in review. We'll now move into the off-season and talk about the two key components in the off-season. First, we'll discuss the off-season roster changes, talk about the free agency period and some of the big pluses and minuses from the team.
All right. So at the Devils, for the most part, we were pretty quiet. We lost a few players to free agency. Oilers fans picked up a really solid defenseman in Mark Fane. We weren't really expecting to lose him. That hurt us a little bit for sure. But at the same time, it makes room for a lot of our younger players that are coming up through the lineup. Other notable players that we lost were Anton Volchenkov, who Nashville signed to a contract. Matthias Tedeby, Swedish forward. There's not much to say about him, unfortunately. He just never really developed for the North American game. Andrei Laktionov, again, decent forward. He won the Stanley Cup with Los Angeles. But again, never really developed into a top six forward, and the North American game really never suited him. Most recently, Minnesota picked up Ryan Carter. At the moment, we just simply have too many forwards to be able to sign him, so they picked up a solid fourth-line energy forward. He's a great center. Devils fans miss him already. And of course, the big name is Marty Brodeur, who still is unsigned by any team, and it doesn't look like anyone's going to sign him just because with the season starting, most teams already have their rosters more or less figured out. They've got their starters and their backup goalies pretty much figured out. So, unfortunately, just doesn't look like there's any room anywhere for him anymore. Big name that we picked up in the offseason, actually, just to put on our top line, was Mike Camilleri. We signed him to a 5-year deal that's paying him, I think, on an average $5 million a year for the cap. We're expecting big things out of him. He's a goal scorer who can be in any situation and dangerous all over the ice. If he puts up 25 goals for us, I think the fan base will be really happy. Another forward we picked up was Marty Havlat, which a lot of people probably scratch their heads at, but we signed him for $1.5 million. So if he gives us 20 points, you really can't argue with that. You know, there's nothing to be upset about. There's no loss there. And as well in the offseason, we signed a number of aging players to professional tryouts. Players like Thomas Caberlet, Scott Gomez, Mike Komisarek, and Jordan Tutu. Most of them were released from their professional tryouts. Tutu has worked hard enough to earn a spot on our fourth line, as well as a contract. And Gomez, in an interesting situation, will be sticking around the team in a training capacity. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, if there's an injury, or if we move someone early on this season, we might sign him to a fourth line type role.
Alrighty, and now the second key component of the offseason. Let's discuss the Devils in the NHL entry draft. Now, you know, with the 30th overall pick in the first round, there wasn't much that could be done there, but kind of go over what the Devils did end up doing there in the draft.
Sure. We had the 30th overall pick, and a lot of people expected the Devils to take Claude Lemieux's son. However, that just didn't work out for the team. The style of play that Brendan Lemieux plays is he's a hard-hitting, gritty forward. I mean, he's got a lot of scoring potential, but the big thing I think the teams are going to see in him is his grit and his hard-nosed, aggressive style of play, which for a lot of teams that's great, but we already have a few players like that in our lineup. We've got Klo, who, you know, he's never steered away from the rough stuff. We've got Tutu now, who again, never steered away from the rough stuff. Bernier, again, he'll drop the gloves and hit whatever's in sight. And in the minors as well, we've got Stefan Matteau, who, again, he's another aggressive, gritty, tough-nosed forward, a lot like Brendan Gallagher and Brad Marchand. So we really didn't need Brendan Lemieux in our lineup. So the Devils went out and got a small puck-moving forward named John Quenneville. He plays in the CHL. And there's not a lot to talk about. I mean, he's a good playmaker. He needs to work on his skating ability and overall his strength as well. He's a smaller forward. He's 6'1", 180 pounds. So a lot like Ryan Nugent-Hopkins or players similar to him, you know, they just need to bulk up a little bit more and get a bit stronger in order to compete at the NHL level. In the second round, so shortly after that 30th pick, with 41st overall, Devils picked up a defenseman named Joshua Jacobs. Again, not a lot to talk about with him. He's a puck-moving defenseman who's going to be playing in the NCAA. So he won't be joining the team anytime soon. It's not expected, but hopefully he'll make an impact in a couple of years.
Okay, and kind of give us a grade of how you feel with what they were able to do. Kind of give us a grade on how you felt the Devils did in the draft?
Overall, I'd give us a grade of probably B minus. I mean, we addressed areas on the team that for players that we're looking for. Always need a puck moving defenseman. They're really big and really valuable in the NHL right now. As well, rather than picking maybe the best player available or the overwhelming popular pick in Brendan Lemieux, they addressed a need that was on the team and went with Quenneville. So I was happy. I mean, with the picks that we had, there's not much you can really do, I suppose. But we could have done worse. That's for sure.
Okay, and that will conclude the look into the off-season, as we'll now kind of go over this upcoming season, or should I say the remainder of this season. We have 81 more games to go now. And kind of talk about the Metropolitan Division this year, and more specifically, how you feel the Devils would rank up in that division.
Sure. The Metro Division, I mean, the Atlantic has always been very competitive, and it's continued with the Metropolitan. Having Columbus and Washington really hasn't made things much easier. For the most part, people in the media and whoever, they can pretty much guess who's going to be first and who's going to be last. But for everyone in the middle, I mean, it's a complete toss-up. You could have Philadelphia, you could have New York, you could have the Devils, you could have Washington, or even the Islanders, all in playoff contention. I mean, they're all very good teams and bring something different. Both the Rangers, the Islanders, and the Flyers and Capitals all have some very good goal scorers and can put up points very easily. Teams like the Devils, we've always relied on defense and goaltending to help us out in games. So with this season, I think we're going to see a switch from the Devils from a defensive playing style to a more offensive. We're still going to try and limit shots, but I don't think you're going to see the same kind of trapped and slow style that you saw from the team, 10 years ago. As for our chances to get in the playoffs, I'm saying we're probably going to get the last wild card spot and just barely sneak in. The hope from the fan base is that we will make the playoffs again and kind of break this 2-year drought. But even if we don't, if we can keep competitive late into March and even to the last couple of games of the season, I'll be happy.
Okay, and as I mentioned, the regular season is very well underway. At this point, the Devils opened their season Thursday against the Philadelphia Flyers. It was a 6-4 Devils victory. Kind of go over kind of break down that game, what you liked out of the Devils, what you didn't like out of the Devils, what Philadelphia did that may have impressed you, and how the Devils responded to those things.
Sure. Well, we came out of the gates just flying. I mean, we came out to a 3-0 lead quickly. What I was most impressed by the Devils leading up to that 3-0 is our transition play, just managing to turn the puck over, or I guess generate some takeaways, and then translate that to 2-on-1s and 3-on-2s and plays into the Flyer zone. We did that pretty successfully, I felt. And 2 of our goals came off of rushes like that. So, obviously that is a strategy that's been worked on by the team, and it's one that's working for us as well. After that, the Flyers managed to mount one heck of a comeback. Giroux, he played as you would expect and just fired a wrist shot right over Corey's glove, and that thing was a laser. I mean, even in the slow-mo replays, you couldn't see that thing. So the other two goals, they were generated by a lot of traffic in front of Corey, and just, tap-ins across the crease, really. So there's not much you can really do about those. They were just good goals that were generated by pressure and by a lot of traffic in front of our net. I think the team after that, we could have probably fallen apart and gotten down on ourselves, thinking, man, we just let the Flyers back into this game, and, how much more do we have in the gas? But they found a way. Shortly after that, we made it 4-4. And then Daniel Zubras stepped up huge for us. He picked up a turnover and fired a puck home to give us the win. So the big takeaway from the game is that even though we've got some players that are question marks, we've got some players that are aging and, kind of senior citizens as far as hockey players are concerned, we managed to find goals. We managed to stay in a game that we looked like we were falling apart in, and we managed to find a way to pull out the W, which is what really matters at the end of the day. We can talk about Corsi and who got how many goals and how many points, but for the players and how much they're concerned, what really matters is if you get the win or not. The big thing that I wasn't impressed with was probably goaltending, but that, was it Corey's fault? Was it the defense's fault? Or were the Flyers just that good and motivated to get the game tied up? So, you can't really fault anybody. We managed to find a way to win.
Alrighty. And tonight, as we mentioned in the beginning of this podcast here, the Devils are back in action again this evening, 6 p.m. Central Time. They travel to Sunrise, Florida to take on the Florida Panthers. What do you think we can expect out of that game?
I think you'd expect more of the same from the team. Come out flying, set up their game early, try and generate some turnovers, and get some offensive zone breaks. From what it looks like, the lineup is going to be the exact same. So you'll see Camilleri, Zajac, and Yager together, Zubras, Ilyash, and Havlat together, Klo, Henrique, Ryder together, and Rutu, Gianta, and Tutu all on forward. And Schneider will be back between the pipes for us. So more or less, it looks like it's going to be another game just to kind of see where the players are at, where the chemistry's at, and see if there's any tweaks or anything that need to be made.
Alrighty, and now we'll move into the miscellaneous questions, and we'll begin with who you feel would be the top goals and points scorer for the team for this season.
That's a good question. I think for points, you'll probably see Yager or Henrique lead us for points. For goals, I'm thinking Camilleri. He's just a pure goal scorer. He's got one heck of a release, and he's already got 2 for us. So hopefully he can continue that and keep putting more in the net for the Devils.
Alrighty, and now this one in terms of not just play skill, but also intangibles, leadership, grit, what have you. And this could be anyone on the roster too. Who do you see being the Devils' top overall player, the one that would have the most impact for the team?
I think that is going to be Yager again. Last year he stepped up huge for us. He paved the way for a lot of players. He was one of our more consistent players in the lineup, so I don't think there's any reason to expect that to change at all. He's expected to be on the top line all season. It just depends on how healthy he can stay.
Okay. I want my co-host Dave at full attention for this one because,
Okay.
well, for now at the moment, teasers. This could be the last time we ask this question. We ask Dave's favorite question.
Mm-hmm.
Let us say that everything that can go wrong with the Devils does go wrong, and the New Jersey Devils media and the Devils fan base, they're looking for a scapegoat. Who would be that scapegoat? Who would be their public enemy number one?
Public enemy number one definitely would be DeBoer. Being the head coach, you're responsible for all the on-ice decisions. Regardless of what the players do and how they perform, the coach is the one that sets up the strategies and gets everyone prepared for the game. So if everything goes sideways this season and the Devils just fall apart, I think you could see a coaching change.
Alrighty. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we have now concluded our 30-part team overview. We begin with the Buffalo Sabres about, how long ago was that, Dave? How long ago did we begin this?
I want to say June.
Back in June, and here
It was
we
like
are.
a week or two after the Stanley Cup final.
Mm-hmm. And here we are, folks, in October, here with our friend Cozy here, wrapping up this 30-part series. Thank you very much, Cozy, for joining us this afternoon and discussing the New Jersey Devils.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Mm-hmm. And now we'll enter our closing legalese for this episode. Once again, we'd like to thank Ryan for joining us to discuss the New York Rangers. You can find him on Reddit. His username there is BetterCallStall. And you can find him on Twitter. His username is @RyanOhan. And we'd, again, like to thank Cozy for joining us for discussing the New Jersey Devils. You can find him on Reddit. His username there is Cozy47. And you can find him on Twitter. His handle there is @TheRealCozy. For our HockeyCast, for the upcoming schedule, Dave, we're getting so many new shows and returning shows. I can't even keep up with the schedule. Do you happen to have an upcoming schedule with you?
Yes, I am uploading the page right now. On Monday nights at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, we'll have the Puck and Awesome show. It's been there all summer long, and it'll continue to stay in the same spot. And then also on Monday night, we have the Our Hockey After Hours show at midnight Eastern. We're not sure if they're actually going to do it. They're kind of iffy on when their show actually airs. On Tuesdays at 7 p.m., we have Crashing the Continent with Lockria. On Thursdays, we have, at 7:30, it's Toddler Thursdays. I think they're still working out the name. And also at midnight, we have Our Hockey After Hour again. On Friday, the D4 The Mighty Dave show will be returning at 8 p.m. And on Saturday is the show here at 3 p.m.
Alrighty, folks, and that is your weekly schedule for our HockeyCast as it stands at the moment. From what I gather, we're still working out some of the kinks to add a couple more shows there. It's a very exciting time for our HockeyCast listeners as the NHL and all the other hockey league seasons are getting kicked off. And for the Wooden Ball Show, I am Blake. You can find me on Reddit. My username there is BTownBomb. And on Twitter, you can find me at ShattenMyKirk. For Dave, you can find him on Reddit. His username there is Blinson. And on Twitter, you can find his handle at Blinson1. And for our HockeyCast, you can find us on Twitter. Our username there is at our HockeyCast. Be sure to look up our subreddit. Our address there is our HockeyCast, our HockeyCast. You can look up our website, ourhockeycast.com, to look up a archive of the Wooden Ball Show as well as other fine programming here at Our HockeyCast. And you can do that same thing on our YouTube channel. Our channel name there is Our HockeyCast. For Dave Ball, I am Blake Wood. This has been the Wooden Ball Show, and we are signing off.
Have a good night, everybody.